Hello everyone, I'm here to do my wrap up for February. And I'm doing this a couple of days early, but I don't think I'm going to finish anything that I need to talk to you about. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. Um, I have read quite a few books actually. I think I'm getting back into my reading pace. But I'm not going to talk about all of them because I read some of them for the BookTube prize. I'm making good progress with that. I'm about halfway through my assignment, so that's good. I think I will be finished on time. So yeah, and also I have a lot of thoughts that have come up through that are not related to the book. So I think I'm going to make a video about that regarding translated fiction and things like that. But other than that, I have finished 4 books. The first one is Afropean by John Pitts, it's a non-fiction. And John Pitts, as I understand, is a journalist, uh, a British journalist, British black journalist, and he travels through Europe, different cities in Europe, so Paris and Lisbon and Stockholm and Berlin, I think, and he tries to find the black culture within those cities. And he seems to find some kind of connection between all of the different black people that he encounters and some common grounds, despite the fact that each place has its own intricacies. Like, for example, in Paris, there is also a lot of North Africans, and there is a bit of an overlap, and also most West African descent blacks. Whereas, for example, in Amsterdam, black people in the Netherlands tend to be farther down in the generations. Let's say, like in Paris, they are like first or second generation immigrants, whereas here in the Netherlands, they came with the slave trade, so hundreds of years ago, and they are more, let's say, assimilated within the culture in the Netherlands. So he looks at all these nuances, and at the same time, he's looking at the similarities as well, and how, in a way, there is some kind of brotherhood that grows from there. And I found it very interesting. I didn't agree with everything that he said, but in general, that brotherhood, especially, is something that I have observed as well. Like when my husband sees another black person, he is much more likely to talk to them and yeah, get a connection with them, especially if they are immigrants rather than from the place. Yeah, I like the the information that he shared and the structure, as in how he was traveling through the different places. I thought it was a very interesting way to go about it. The only thing I will say is like the writing was very dry at times. It was yeah, sometimes it was too factual and too yeah, there was sometimes there was too much information that I didn't know why it was there, like descriptions of certain places or certain things that were not relevant to the point that he was trying to make. But other than that, I thought it was a well constructed book, and I think it's an interesting one to read because normally we listen to the black experience from African Americans, and there are other experiences from black people in majoritarily white um, white cultures that we don't hear so much about. And normally, when it's black people in Europe, it's normally in Britain. So it was especially interesting to read about other places. Like, I don't think I've ever read an experience from a black person in Stockholm, for example. So that was interesting to me. The next book I finished is Zeitoun by Dave Eggers, and this was the last book that was in my physical TBR from last year. I have a couple more, but they came in this year. So I guess with this book I officially covered the goal that I had for this year to finish the books that I had in my physical TBR, so that I don't have books sitting there for more than a year. So pretty cool. And this is the true story of Zeitoun, who is a Syrian immigrant that had lived more than 20 years in New Orleans, in Louisiana, when the Katrina hit. And it's the experience of this man who stayed in New Orleans. And what happened to him. He is a constructor in his day-to-day life, and he was a very likable character, or he was presented as a very likable character. I particularly like this point in which, well, he was a Muslim, obviously, and when he started his painting business, he decided that he was going to have a rainbow as his logo, without realizing that the rainbow is also the symbol for gay and queer people. Um, and when he found out that that was the case, and that some clients were not contracting him because they thought he was either queer or supporting queer people, um, he and his wife had the conversation if he wanted to change the logo, and he just said, well, the people that don't want to hire me because they don't like gays, they most likely also don't like Muslims, so why would I engage with those people? I thought it was a very fun little detail, and yeah, it was like a cool person. This book covered more or less what I expected from this book, so all the destruction that the Katrina brought, and how people were isolated, and how much it destroyed in like property, but also all of the people that died. But the second part took a direction that I did not expect, that I didn't know about. I knew that there had been a lot of military going there, and there was not a very safe environment. But yeah, in the second part, we see that the military arrests him with other people that were in his apartment, and he goes through this super traumatic experience where he is in a prison, kind of like treated like a terrorist, like almost Guantanamo, like for more than a month, because he was there, and they thought, well, if you are here at this point in the Katrina, it's because you're here to either do a terrorist attack or to loot. There was a lot of looting in the city. Something must be wrong with you. And he was treated really badly. Like, he was not given his rights. He was not given a call. He was not given a trial, and that happened to a lot of people. And because he was Syrian, then they also said, well, you must be a terrorist because you're Syrian. And all of these things that he goes through, and his wife goes through, because his wife, when the Katrina was about to hit, she did leave the city and she went to Phoenix to stay with a friend. And she didn't hear from him for a really long time, and she was thinking he was dead in the hurricane, but he wasn't. He was in this prison, and nobody knew why he was in prison, and all of these things. So yeah, that part I completely did not expect from this book, but I thought it was really illuminating, and I really enjoyed, well, not enjoyed, that's not the correct word. I really appreciated that it was in this book, because it's something I didn't know about and didn't realize until I read this. So yeah, it's something from the Katrina that I didn't expect, and I enjoyed how it was written as well. Then the next book I finished, it's another nonfiction. It seems that all of the books that I have to talk to you about this month are nonfiction, but the next one is An Apartment in Uranus, by Paul Preciado, and this is a book that is published from Fitzcarraldo, and it's translated. I don't remember the translator, but I will put it somewhere. And this book is, I read it because it's Fitzroy. If you don't know what that is, you can go to Katie Book's channel and find out. Paul Preciado is a transgender person. I think they mostly identify with the masculine side of things, but actually this is he wrote short columns in newspapers, mostly Liberation from France, throughout the years, and this is kind of a collection of those little pieces that he wrote, and it goes through his transition. And he is a Spanish person that lives mostly in between Barcelona, Paris, and Athens, kind of. And he talks about the process of transition and transitioning and how connected is also to the idea of immigration. But he also talks a lot about politics. For example, the Catalan independence movement and the Greek crisis. He talks about what it is to love a city and what it is to displace yourself from where you were born. And he talks about the gender norms and how they don't make sense. That's why it's like he doesn't completely um, identify with the word man, but he's more in the masculine spectrum of things. Um, but at the same time, recognizing that this masculine feminine spectrum, it doesn't really make sense, and we are just people, and the whole idea of gender is messed up. It was brilliant. He's very, very funny and very poignant and very smart. So yeah, I really enjoyed this read. I will recommend really to everybody, and I thank Bob from the Bobosphere to recommend this book in his channel, because that's why I read it and I really, really loved it. So yeah, if you haven't read it, I will recommend. The last book I have to talk to you about is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, by Walter something. I'm horrible with names, sorry, but I will put the name somewhere. Um, and this book I read because the author is from Guyana, and Guyana was one of the Invisible Cities countries for this month. And I am not doing Invisible Cities at the moment, but I'm still trying to read from a country that I have never read before every month. And I thought that since this month Guyana was one of the countries for Invisible Cities, and I have never read from Guyana, it was the perfect match to do that. And this book is basically what says in the tin. It's about how Europe affected Africa in a way that made them underdeveloped under standards of development that the Europeans put in place. It looks a little bit about the history of Africa, how it got colonialized, how the standards of what was the standards of what a developed country meant, or what a country meant, were imposed by the Europeans. Why Europeans prevailed, basically because of capitalism. Capitalist systems have certain characteristics that make it easier for them to prevail over other systems, which doesn't really necessarily mean that they are better. They're just like there are certain capitalist characteristics. One of them is the need for expansion that make it really likely that capitalist countries will like to conquer and colonialize other places, and their ways of trading, which in our societies now determine how developed a country is, but it's a random decision that that's how we measure development. How those parameters made Europeans see Africans as underdeveloped, despite the fact that Africa had a lot of different systems that were very complex, and there were several big empires that prevailed, like the Ethiopian Empire or the Nubian Empire, that are really, really complex and really advanced in other ways. But all of that was disregarded because those things didn't fit within the development goals of Europeans. And from colonialism on, Europe just kept pushing down Africans and giving them things because it was beneficial for Europeans, not for Africans, like education, for example. The type of education that they were given and the people that they were giving it to was not to benefit Africans, it was to benefit Europeans. That's basically kind of the idea of the book regarding the relationship between Europe and Africa and how it has developed. And it had a line at the end that I really liked. It says, "The only positive development in colonialism was when it ended. That's kind of like the spirit of the book. So I think that the ideas were very interesting to read, and I think there is a lot of um, truth in them. Maybe I don't agree with everything, but in general, I think it's a interesting insight. It's not a completely new insight for me, but I think it's an interesting insight to read about. The only thing I will say is that first, it's very dryly written. It's really, really academic, and second, it was written in the 70s, so some of the data are outdated. Like one of the things that it talks about is how um, Africa actually should be very rich because it has a lot of raw materials, and that's what economy values. Whereas I think now at this point in development, the service industry is what gives value more than the raw materials. Although maybe it shouldn't be that way. Maybe we should go back to appreciate the actual things rather than the ideas industry. But I do think that there is a certain value to ideas that it's not so much recognized in that book, and I think it's because of the time it was written. So yeah, there's some things to take into account in that sense, but overall I think it was a good read, and I think it will be interesting to read next to Dead Aid by Dambisa Moyo, because that one also talks about African capitalism, but in a very different light. So she makes a point that right now we live in a capitalist system, and we are not letting Africa compete in the same terms as everyone else. And if we did that, Africa will develop faster. Um, which has a point, but at the same time, is that the way, or we should just get rid of the capitalist system in the first place? That's another conversation that we could have. But I think it will be interesting to read the two of them side by side, because they talk about different things in a very different light, in a different um, focus. Like this book focused a lot more on the past, whereas Dambisa Moyo's book focused a lot more on the future and the present. So yeah, those are some thoughts that I had about that book. That's all I want to talk to you about today in this wrap up. I hope you enjoy. Let me know if you have read any of these books or you want to read any of these books. And until next video, bye.